Data validation is a feature in Excel spreadsheet that restricts or validates user input in an available worksheet. This feature gives the room to technically create a validation rule that controls what kind of data that can be entered into a certain or a particular cell. As based on this explanation, data validation gives you the restrictions rule, or it gives you the validation rule, and this helps you to prompt other users to enter the right or the accurate data for precision and also for better output. And this kind of beautiful feature we have in Excel, we are going to walk through theoretically and also practically, so that we can get the full understanding on how to use this particular feature known as data validation, and know when and where to use this particular feature. So without any further ado, let's dive in and explore the world of data validation. Now, before then, let me expose you to some uses of data validation. It allows users to enter numeric or text values in a certain cell. It also allows users to enter only numbers within a specified range. And also, it allows users to enter data of a specific length. That is to restrict a user to enter a data between maybe 2 to 10, so that when it exceeds that kind of data validation given to yourself, then that is going to be an error alert. And also, you can restrict date and time entry, and as well as creating a drop down list for users to choose whatever option or list that we have within that kind of drop down list. These are some of the uses. We have so many uses, but these are some of the uses of data validation that can be explored whenever you have access to your spreadsheet application, and that's Microsoft Excel. Now, this is my current worksheet that is beautifully open, and I have my well created headers. I have employee ID, name, phone number, hourly wage, hours worked, salary, paid and unpaid option, and also we have the status. We are going to depend on this created data or this data set so that we can input our data depending on data validation. So your data might be different from mine, but following all the step-by-step instruction I'm going to showcase to you using data validation, you can explore that to your data that you have in your spreadsheet application. Now, when it comes to the usage or the opening of data validation window, so that we can experiment that feature, you need to select the cell or a range of cells that is going to consist of that particular data. I will be showcasing to you different ways of applying data validation to your cells in Microsoft Excel. So we are going to start with this particular column header, which is hours worked, and in this company where we have this employee information, we work within 10 hours and 24 hours, and depending on the kind of job or the kind of position you have in that company, and that is going to tell you the number of hours you are going to work within that company. So we are going to use this column header to experiment our first data validation. But before then, how can we get access to data validation? We have two ways of doing this. The first approach is to move to the menu bar and click on this tab known as the data tab. And when you click on this tab, we have a group called data tools, and this is the group that we have here, and we have so many options. We are going to explore this option, which is data validation, and you can see that there's an arrow here. You can click on this arrow, or you can directly click on this option, which is data validation. When I click on this option, I have this dialog box of data validation, and these are the options in this particular interface. When you also click on this drop down arrow, you have data validation. We also have circle invalid data, and we have clear validation circles. In this case, we are going to explore data validation, and that is purposely in this particular video. And when you place your pointer on this, you have a screen tip that says pick from a list of rules to limit the type of data that can be entered in a cell. For example, you can provide a list of values like 1, 2, 3, or only allow numbers greater than 1000, as valid entries. And as I said, I'm going to dive you deep into this data validation. We are going to learn a lot about the experimentation of this data validation feature in Microsoft Excel. So I'll urge you to watch this video to the end, because you are going to gain something. And when you get access to your worksheet with your available data set, you can explore the world of data validation, and that is going to enable you to get the accurate data entered into your individual cells. So when I click on this option, this also provides me with a dialog box of data validation. So this is how to get to the data validation of Microsoft Excel. You can also use the Alt key and the letter D and the letter L on the keyboard. This also provides you the data validation. So when you hold this keyboard shortcut, that is Alt DL, which is pressed separately, and that is going to give you this opened dialog box of the data validation. And this is where we are going to explore all the necessary elements of this feature. Now, as I said earlier, I'm going to start with the hours worked. So I'm going to select these cells, and this is where I'm going to end my entry for the hours worked. And now that these cells are selected, we can move to the data tab and click on this option. And also you can use the keyboard shortcut, or you can also click on the drop down arrow and choose this particular option. And then we are going to have this data validation dialog box. Now below this option, we have settings, input message, and we have error alert. We will be practically experimenting these tabs that we have here. But when you get to this validation criteria, we have allow. And by default, this allow is set to any value. This tells you that when you get to your individual cells that we have here, you can type any value in these cells, and this is a free range or free space for every Excel user to type anything. You can type a text, a number, you can type a symbol, anything can be typed into the cells of Microsoft Excel. So because this is set to any value, it means that you have the option to type anything in your cell. So let's try this traditional input. So if I go back to my cells, I can type a number, and when I hit enter, it is being accepted by Microsoft Excel. If I type this text and press enter, this is also accepted by Microsoft Excel. Why? Because the traditional validation given to the cells in Microsoft Excel is any value. So you can type anything into your cells. If I type a symbol, you can see that I have typed this text, and I also have this symbol attached to this text. Therefore, this is also accepted by Microsoft Excel. So anytime you get access to your spreadsheet for the first time and you start to enter data into it, you should note that any value can be entered into any cells at any time. Now we are moving to the advanced way of personalizing this data entry from any value to a custom value. So how are we going to do this? So I'm going to delete all these cells. Then I'm going to select my cells, move back to the data tab and choose data validation. And then when you get to this allow section, you are going to click on this drop down arrow, and we have whole number. So this is set to whole number. And when you click on whole number, these are the options you have under the data field. And the first option is between. And having this option set, this gives you the minimum value and also the maximum value. And as I said during my introduction, I said in the company, we work within 10 to 24 hours. So the minimum working hours should be 10, while the maximum should be 24. So I'm going to enter 10 here for the minimum value and also 24 for the maximum value. And when I click on OK, this restriction or this validation component has been given to all these cells that we've selected here. And let's testify that. So I'm going to select the first cell, and then in this first cell I'm going to type 10, and this is accepted because we had the minimum value as 10 whilst the maximum value is 24. When I type 24, it's accepted. Now when I type 25, now this gives us this pop-up window that says Microsoft Excel, this value does not match the data validation restrictions defined for this cell. So now we have three options here: retry, cancel, or help. So when I choose cancel, this is going to ignore you from entering that value that exceed the maximum value for the data restriction. Or if I type 9 and press the enter key, this tells me that the data I've entered here is not the minimum value. It has not matched the data restriction that is given to these selected cells. Therefore, this is the output, and this is a custom output or pop-up window that is given to you whenever you enter a data that do not match the data restrictions of a particular cell. And these informations or this pop-up window is customizable. So I'll also show you how to personalize this information that will suit your preference. So these cells that we have here, any value that we are going to enter should be between 10 and 24. So as you can see, I've entered the values that are within our minimum and maximum setup that was given when we were having our data validation restrictions. So if I change this to 26, this tells me that this is a wrong value. Therefore, it does not match the data validation restrictions. So I have to retry, and this is the accurate value. Now when we get to this cell, because this cell is not set to the data validation, when you enter any value here, it's going to be accepted because there's no restriction given to these cells. So note, anytime you want to apply data validation, you should select the cell or the range of cells you want to have that application. So this is the data validation for whole numbers between a specified range. Now when you have data validation given to your cells and you want to clear them, we have so many ways of doing it, and along the way I'll be exploring all those ways to you. The first approach is to select all the cells. So I'm going to click on this first cell, hold down the control key, the shift key, and the down arrow key. This is going to select all the cells. Move to the home tab, and then we have the editing group, and we have this clear command. When you click on the drop down arrow, we have clear all, and this is going to clear the format, the data entered, and anything that is involved in that selected range of cells. So I have cleared everything. There's no data validation restriction given to this cell. Therefore, if I type this, it is accepted, and as you can see, perfectly done. So let's move back to our data validation, the data tab, data validation, and this was set to whole number, and we had it between 10 and 24. Now when you click on this drop down arrow, we have other options here. The next option is not between. This tells you that any data you are going to enter should not be between the specified restriction that is going to be typed in the minimum and also the maximum field. So if I type this, so now I have this minimum as 24 and the maximum as 48. This means that the values we are going to type should not be between these values. If you have the value as 25, it will be ignored. If you have the value as 48, that will also be ignored. Now let's look at this. If I click on OK, get back to my cells, when I type 24, it is ignored because it says values between 24 and 48. So this is going to ignore me because I set the restriction as not between. But if I cancel or retry, now 23 is accepted. This is 32, and 32 is between 24 and 48. So when I give out this data to a group of people who need to enter their information into these cells, I'll be restricting them based on the accurate information that we want. So if an employee or a colleague enter a data between 24 and 48, Excel is going to deny that particular data entry. Therefore, this will be the pop-up that is going to appear. That tells you that the data validation restrictions defined for these cells does not match. Therefore, you have to enter the data which is not between 24 and 48. So you can see that the data I am entering are above 48 and also below 24. But in this case, we said our hours worked within the company is between 10 and 24. Therefore, if our restriction is between 24 and 48, then it means that we should try and be between our range of hours worked. Because this is for tutorial purposes, you will know when and how to apply this feature to your data, and that will depend on the organized and analyzed data that you have in your worksheet. So this is the next restriction we can give when we are dealing with data validation, that is whole numbers between a specified range and also whole numbers not between a specified range. And as I said, if you want to clear the data validation, Control Shift down. This time around, we are not going to use the Home tab and the clear command. Rather, we go to the Data tab, choose Data Validation, and choose Clear All. And this is going to clear all the data validation. But the side effect is that it's going to maintain the data available. Therefore, you use the Delete key on the keyboard so that you can delete the data that is entered into this range of cells. Now, let's move back to our Data tab, Data Validation. This time around, we have the next one that says equal to. Let's assume that in a company, we have a specified hours that we work before you leave the company to your various destinations, and you have to work within 12 hours. So if I enter 12 in this field, it means that all the data we are going to enter in these cells should be equal to 12, because that is the data that is set, or that is the validation restriction that is set for these selected cells. So if I type 11, this gives me this pop-up which says this value does not match the data validation restrictions defined for these cells. But if I enter 12, it is accepted. When I enter 13, it says that this does not match. It means that those selected range of cells that was validated using the data validation restriction should be equal to 12, and no other data can be entered into that cells. This is the power of data validation. So as I said, depending on the kind of data that you have created and what kind of information that you need in the cells of that column headers, you should know the kind of data validation you should apply to those selected cells. This is the power of this feature we are looking at in this tutorial. So as usual, you need to enter 12 throughout, and that is what is going to be accepted. Any other data will be ignored. So that is the power of data validation. So I'm going to clear this data validation. Now when we go to the next section, we have not equal to. This is also a specialized data validation restriction that can be applied. Let's assume that you have a certain data, you don't want to have a specific value or a specific data entry into a cell. You can match that value in this particular field. That is, let's say I don't want the value that to enter should be equal to 48. So if I click this and type, it is accepted. Any value that you enter will be accepted, but the moment you type 48, that is going to be ignored. So it means that that particular data should not be entered. So it might be data entry of some values. You can restrict your users from entering a particular data such as 100. Maybe you want them to input a data from 1 to 99, but you don't want them to enter 100 into the cells of that particular data validation. Therefore, you will restrict them by putting a value not equal to 100 so that they can enter the data from 1 to 99 and ignore 100. So you could see that when I entered 48, this has given me this prompt or this error alert. Therefore, I need to enter any other value apart from 48, and that will be accepted. So as you can see, so when it comes to clearing, you can select Home tab, choose clear and choose clear all. I normally like using the clear all option under the Home tab because this clears the data validation and its content. Now let's select our cells once again. This time around, I'm going to customize my error alert and also apply some information to alert users to enter the accurate data that is needed. So move back to your data tab, data validation, or you can use your keyboard shortcut Alt DL. So if you look up to not equal to, the next one is greater than. This is, we want to restrict users to enter a data which is greater than a particular value we are going to provide. In my company, the hours that is work is between 10 to 24, and everybody is aware. And if you enter below 10, that is not going to be accepted. So I'm going to have my minimum value as 10. It means that any data that we're going to enter should be greater than this 10, or it should be above 10. Therefore, this time I'm going to choose input message and I'm going to have a title. So under the input message, I just input this information that says hours worked. That is going to be the title of that input message, and also the input message itself is enter data above 10. And if this is given to the cells, this is going to prompt and let users to identify whatever data they should enter in that selected cells. So I'm going to click on OK. Now when I get back to my selected cells, when I select this cell, nothing happens. But if I select the cell that consists of the data validation, it says hours worked, enter data above 10. So if a user sees this information, this is going to prompt them not to type data below 10, because when I type 8 and hit enter key, this gives me this error alert. But if you enter 10, this also brings out this pop-up window which tells you that this is also an error, because the screen tip that we have here, which is the input message, says enter data above 10. So it means that 11 will be accepted. So all this data I am entering is above 10, but if you enter 10 or below 10, that will not be accepted. This is one particular feature you can add to your data validation, that is input message, and that is going to prompt your users to have a perfect and accurate data entry in the provided worksheet. So this is how to add input message to your data validation restrictions. I'm going to select all cells and ignore. Now another thing is, when you select all cells, you might not clear them. Rather, you can go back to your data validation and apply a new rule to your data validation. So let's move back to settings. And now the next one is less than. Now when we say less than, this is going to be the numbers that are going to type below the maximum value that is going to be provided in this particular field. And as I said, we work between 10 and 24 hours. So I am going to type 25 as my maximum value, and then that is going to be less than. But when I move back to my input message, I can change this to enter data below 25 and click on OK. Now when I get back to my cells, I have this hours worked, that is the input message, and also I have enter data below 25. So if I type 24, it is accepted, 22 accepted, 23 accepted, 10 accepted, 25. This is not going to be accepted because we have to enter data below 25. And from the screen tip or the input message, every user is going to have an accurate data entry, because this particular option is going to prompt them to enter the exact data. So I hope we are learning something in this particular video. We are learning how to apply data validations to our data. So as you can see, I am using this particular column, which is hours worked, to show you how to enter data using whole numbers. So when we are exploring other options, we'll be using these column headers here, and at the end of this video we are going to occupy all these column headers with the appropriate data. So let's go back. The next option or data option under the whole numbers is greater than or equal to. So it means that you have to set a value that is greater than or equal to. So in this case, I'm going to type 10. It means that the value that is going to be entered in these particular cells should be above 10 or equal to 10. So if I click on OK, let me go back and change the input message. So the input message says enter data equal to or greater than 10. Now when you get back to your interface, you can see that this cell that I have selected is having this input message hours worked, enter data equal to or greater than 10. So if I enter 10, it is accepted. 22 is accepted. Now when I type 9, this is not accepted because this value do not fall between the criteria or the data validation restriction given to these selected cells. The data that should be entered should be equal to 10 or above 10. This is how to also use the greater than or equal to option under the whole number restriction to enter data in Microsoft Excel. Let's select all these cells. Data validation. The last one is less than or equal to. So this is also similar to the greater than or equal to. And in this case, you are going to type the maximum value, 24. It means that the value you are going to enter should be equal to 24 or less than 24. When we get back to this, 25 is not accepted because this value is above 24. We can go back and change our input message. It is very important for you to change the input message, and that is going to alert your users to enter the appropriate data. So when I select this cell, enter data equal to or less than 24. So as you can see, I entered 26 and that is not accepted. And this gives us this prompt. And as I said earlier, when we get to other criteria, I'll be showing you how to customize this output message that is given to you. And it's called the error alert. So I have based on the whole number option in the data validation dialog box to enter my data under the column header hours worked. So what I can do now is to format this data by selecting all these cells, move to the home tab, and then we have center. And I can also choose this particular option. It has a specific formatting. select this format painter, click and drag over it, and this has given a currency format or formatting to this data. I'll move back to the home tab. In the number group, click on this arrow and I'm going to choose general, and I'm going to change this from currency to general. Therefore, I have formatted this data and that is perfectly entered under the column header hours worked. So this is our first option in the data validation restriction of using whole numbers. How to enter whole numbers, how to enter data between a specified range, and how to also give an input message to your source. And as you can see, now we are moving to our next option, which is to enter decimal numbers. In this case, I'm going to use a separate column here. Now we have this decimal numbers, which is a column header, and let's assume we want to enter data between 10.5 and 30.5. We also have a restriction that can help us to do so. When it comes to measuring of certain things like height, distance, normally these particular values or data comes with a decimal number. So if you have a data that deals with distance, height, or any other measurement values, then this particular data validation I'm going to expose to you can help you to have a specified data restriction. So how can we do this? I'm going to select only these cells, move to the data tab, data validation, select this cell, choose decimal from the list. We have minimum and maximum, so I can type 10.5, 30.5. When I click on OK and get back to these cells, and I type 10.5, this is accepted. 30.5 is accepted. 12.5 is accepted because it is in the range of 10.5 and also 30.5. 32.5, this is not accepted because it says this value does not match. Why? Because the range that we have, or the specified range that we have, is 10.5 and 30.5. Therefore, any number that will exceed or that will be below the specified range is going to bring out an error. That is, if the number exceeds 30.5, know when to use this particular feature. I just wanted to showcase this feature to you because in my column headers, I don't have a data that I'm going to enter that is going to consist of decimal numbers. That is why I've created this separated column, so that when you have such data in your worksheet, you can use this particular feature. 9.5 is not accepted. This is accepted. This is not accepted because it is above 30.5. This is how to apply a decimal restriction to your data. When you select, we can also go for not between, or we can also go for equal to. We can also go for greater than. Let's assume that greater than, we want the value should be 20.5, that is above 20.5. So when you come into your source, 20.5 is not accepted. 20.6 is accepted. 30.5 is accepted. 19.5 is not accepted because the restriction is above 20.5. This is how to add decimal restrictions to your data. If I select these cells, move back to my data validation, I also have other options here, less than, greater than, and you can explore all these options. That is why I took my time to explore all these options when we were talking about whole numbers. And you can apply the same illustration to this decimal option, where you can go for between, not between, equal to, not equal to, less than or equal to. All these are options to you. Take your time, identify your data, know the kind of data that you've created, and apply these data validations to your worksheet. Please, if you are enjoying this video, take your time I want you to clap for me. And also take your time and press the like button to also show an extensive motivation. Now let's get back to our data validation rules. The next one is list. This time around, I'm going to select this, go to the home tab and choose clear all. I'm going to clear everything. Now the next data validation is about list. So let's assume that this column header that we have here is employee name. We're going to have some name, and we can allow users to enter their name personally, and because there might be a spelling error and also there might be an inaccurate data entry, we want to restrict them using data validation. Therefore, we are going to provide a list for them to choose from. Whoever is going to create this worksheet is going to take his or her time and enter all the names appropriately, so that when these names are given to these employees, they have to just click on the drop down arrow and choose from the list of options. So what I'm going to do is to select all these cells, then hold the Alt DL. Now I have my data validation window. Choose this and choose list. Now when you choose list, we have this field that says source. When I click in this field, I can type the name I want these users to choose. So let's assume that we have the names of the employees in the company. We are going to input all their names in this particular field. Now anytime you are entering the data you want your users to choose from, you make sure that you use the comma to separate them, and make sure there's no spaces provided after a particular comma. So in this case, I'm going to click in this field, press the F2 on the keyboard so that this will be editable. I can use my arrow keys and move to the beginning of these names. I'm going to make sure that every data is entered perfectly. So you can see that in this particular section, there is a space between the comma and the next name. You make sure that it is closed. Now everything is perfectly done. When you're done, you can click on OK. Now when you get back to your interface, when you click on any of these cells that are validated, you are going to see an arrow beside it. Therefore, the user has to click, and then going to have all these lists appeared to them, and what they are to do is to look through the list and choose their name. So if I want to choose my name, I'm going to click on this, and that is going to be appeared. The next person clicks, so you can see how I am having a perfect data entry just choosing from the list of options. Now when this data is given out, there should be some input message. There should be an error alert if there is going to be a wrong data entry, or there should be an input message to alert users to choose from the list of options. So I'm going to select all these, move back to the data validation. Now in this case, I'll move back to input message and type so I have this input message that says drop down option available. Please make sure to choose from the list of options. I'm going to click on OK. Now when we get back to this data, and any user that gets access to this data, when he or she select this cell, he or she is going to see this input message that says drop down option available. Please make sure to choose from the list of options. So this will prompt every user to choose from the list that is provided by clicking on this arrow. And this helps to have accurate data in your worksheet. Now let's assume a user did not choose from this option, but rather type a different name. So this is a name that is not part of the list. When he or she hits the enter key, this is what we are going to have. The value does not match the data validation restrictions defined for this cell. And as I said earlier, I said I will show you how to customize this output. and that's what I'm going to do. Select all these cells, data validation, and then I'll move back to error alert. Now when it comes to error alert, it says when user enters invalid data, show this error alert. The first error alert is stop, and stop means this is going to prevent users from entering invalid data. That is the stop function. It's going to disallow every user from entering invalid data. So we are going to start with this particular option, and I'm going to give a title to this error alert. And also a message for this error alert. So for the error message, it says please make sure to choose from the list of options. Click the arrow beside the selected cell, and that's going to be my pop-up error alert if there's a wrong data entry. And I'm going to click on OK. Now, as I said earlier, when you click on the cell, we have this input message which is going to alert you to choose from the list of options. If you ignore this and try to type a different name, now when you hit the enter key, now this is the customized error alert. It says drop down list criteria, please make sure to choose from the list of options. Click the arrow beside the selected cell. So you click on retry, and now this is going to prompt you that there's an arrow beside the selected cell. So you just click on it and choose your name. If you try to type a different name, you have this error alert, which is a customized error alert. Please make sure to choose from the list of options. Retry. So you can see that I am trying to click on this arrow, but it is preventing me. Why? Because I have this information available. So you click on cancel, then you choose from the option. So anytime you have a problem of erasing an unknown data, try to use the cancel option so that you can choose from the list of options. So this is how to apply a list data validation to your selected cells. Another thing that we can do when it comes to data validation in terms of providing a list of options to choose from is when you have a well organized data entered in a different sheet, you can input that into your list of options. So what am I trying to say here? I'm going to erase everything. Now that these cells are selected, let's move back to the data validation settings. Now this time around, we are going to erase everything, and we are not going to manually enter a data here. Rather, we click on this arrow. If you have your well organized data typed in a different sheet, you can move to that sheet, and then you select that list of options. So these are the names of the employees in that company. Then you click on this button and click on OK. Now when you get back to your sheet, you can click, and now you have this list of options, and you can choose your name. So you can see how beautifully this is allowing us to enter an accurate data. So as I said, if you try to enter a different name, you have this prompt that make sure to choose from the list of options. Click the arrow beside the selected cell. Then you can choose retry or cancel. So I'm going to enter all the data. I have finished entering all the data using the list option. That is the data validation list option. So this is how to restrict your users from entering data. What you have to tell them, or what you have to prompt them, is that choose from the list of options. So you can see how data validation can be very helpful when it comes to data entry. Now we are moving to the next option, and this time around is about dates. In this case, I have this employee ID, phone number, hourly wage, I have hours worked, this, and also we have status. I'm going to use a different column header so that you understand what I mean, because as I said we'll be using some of this data validation to fill up all these column headers. So those that do not need in this particular data set, you're going to have a separate cell or column for them and explore that particular feature. So we have this as date. Now when I select these cells, move to my data tab, data validation, choose date, now when I selected date, it says between. It means that when you click, you have all these options which was available when we were dealing with the decimal restriction and also the whole number restriction. So in this case, I'm going to emphasize on between and also greater than. So I am going to select between. Now for between, we have a start date and also we have end date. So in this case, if you have a data that is going to prompt users to enter date between a specified range, then this particular option should be beneficial. So in this case, I'm going to enter the start date, and that start date is going to be 11th of October 2024. And note, any value that you type first represent the month, then the next goes with the day, and the last one becomes the year when it comes to the format of Microsoft Excel. So this is going to be my start date, and also my end date is going to be, so my start date is 11th of October 2024, then my end date is 12th of December 2024. So if I click on OK, now these cells that I have selected here, if I type a date, it says it is correct. This is also correct. Now this is not going to be accepted because this particular date that we have entered is not between the 11th of October and 12th of December. Therefore this has exceeded that particular date. Therefore Excel is not going to accept this particular date, and as you can see, this is the error alert that is being provided. I have already showed you how to customize this output. We are going to explore other options. So let's select these cells, data validation, error alert. This time around I'm going to choose warning. Now this particular feature does not prevent data entry, rather it warns you that you have typed an invalid entry. So I'm going to choose this particular option. I'll give a title, and then I'm going to input the error message. So this is my error message that says please make sure your date is between these two dates that we have specified. Then I'm going to click on OK. Now if I type this date here, this is accepted. Now this is not accepted, but it can be still entered into the data. Excel is also telling me that invalid entry, please make sure your date is between these two specified dates. So if I choose no, then I have the option to change the date. But if I choose yes, this is going to accept this date whilst it is an invalid date. So you should know when to use the error alert, which is the stop option, and also the warning option. So in this case, we all know that this particular date is wrong, and that is not what is restricted in our data validation. So know when to use your error alert option. So that is the data validation option. When we move back to data validation settings, the next one is time. So as you can see, This also has that kind of between, the greater than. So you should know how to use this particular option. When you go back to date, you can also specify greater than. So there will be a date where they should enter a date that is above the specified date you are going to provide in this particular list. So if I type this particular date here and click on OK, therefore I have to select my cell, data validation, greater than, and then I'm going to maintain this date and click on OK. So if I enter, it says it is wrong. So we have to enter what is above this date. This is accepted, and as you can see, this is also accepted. So we are entering a date that is above the specified date that was entered into the data validation field. So that is the date. And as I said, you can also apply this to time as well. It's the same thing as compared to the date. So I'm not going to waste much time on the time data validation. We move to the next one, which is text length. Let me close this window, and we are going to have that particular option given to this. I'm going to select all these cells. Another way of applying data validation, you might select only one cell. Later on, you can apply those data validation formatting to the other cells. So what we can do is, when I select this cell, I'll hold the shortcut and then move to my any value and choose text length. Now I want the length we are going to have here should between a specified range. You can also go for other options here. You can go for not between, greater than, less than, equal to. We have less than or equal to. And as I said, these are options you can, based on your preference, and modify. In this case, because of tutorial purposes and without wasting much time, I'm going to work within the between. So in this case, this is when a user receive a salary. That option we have here should be paid or unpaid, and that is the only option that we want to have under our status. And when you look at the paid characters, we have 4 characters, and when we have unpaid, unpaid has 6 characters. So I'm going to have my text length between 4 and 6. Now when I click on OK and get back to this cell, if I type paid, this is accepted. Unpaid, this is also accepted. Let's assume I type payment. This is also accepted. Do you know why? Because the data restriction is given to this cell that we have here. So if you want to have it for the other cells, you select this cell, move to the home tab and click on the copy command. You can also right click and choose copy from the option. And also you can use Ctrl+C on the keyboard. Now that we have this copied, you can select all the cells you want to apply your data validation to. Then you right click. You can go to paste special, click on this arrow and choose paste special. And you can choose validation from this option and click on OK. Now this has this particular validation given to all these cells. Therefore, we can press the escape key on the keyboard. Now if I type unpaid, accepted, payment, this is not accepted. Why? Because we have the restriction as text length between 4 and 6 characters. So in this case, we can even apply the error alert. So we can select all these cells, error alert. We can type so let's assume that this is going to be our error alert. Then we click on OK. Now if I type this, I have this error alert. It says status of employee. Make sure you enter paid or unpaid. This is a grammatical error, so I'll go back and correct this. So anytime you type a letter that exceeds 6 characters or less than 4 characters, that is going to give you this prompt that status of employee. Make sure to enter paid or unpaid status. So you can cancel so that you can have the right information applied. So this is how to use this text length effect in Microsoft Excel. So you can see that I've filled up the status, hours worked, and also have my salary, and also we have hourly wage, which is a value we are going to enter. And I'm also going to show you how you can input this particular data under this particular column header. So the next on our list is, when you go back, we have custom. Now in this custom, I'll show you different custom way of inputting data into your Microsoft Excel, because Excel has several built-in data validation rules for numbers, date, and text, and that is what we have covered previously. Now Excel gives you the space to validate cells with your own criteria, and that is called custom validation. So we are going to apply some custom validation to our cells, and that is not going to be based on the predefined or the built-in options which we have already covered. But this time around, we are going to look at our own way of applying functions and formulas to restrict data entry. So that is what we are going to do. So when it comes to this particular column, which is hourly wage, I'm going to select all these cells, data validation, click on this and choose custom. Now when you choose custom, this says formula. So you need to type a formula that is going to restrict data entry. Now this particular column header I've selected, I'm going to apply a formula which is going to help users to enter only numbers in that particular field, and I'm going to use a function called the is number. So after clicking in this field, you type the equal to symbol, then you type the is number function, open your brackets, and you look at the first reference. Now in this range of cell, this is the active cell, but this range of cells that we have here is the active range. But you need to make a starting or an initial reference, and that's going to be the first cell in that range of cell, and that is D3. Then you close the bracket. Now when you click on OK and get to this field, let's assume I type 30. This is what I have, because I have already formatted this as currency. So when I type 30, I'm going to have it in the currency form. 25. Now you can see that automatically this salary is updating because I have applied a formula that is multiplying this hours worked and also hourly wage. And you can see how I am controlling my data, and at the end of the day, I'm going to have my data filled up using data validation. So when I get to this side, 20, 50, 24. Now let's see if I type a text. This is not going to allow me because the function that I gave it to this selected range of cells in the data validation dialog box is number. It means that anything that we are going to type in that cells that have that kind of validation should consist of numbers. So if you try to input a text, this is going to ignore you. So in this case, you also have the option to apply error alert to your cells. I'm going to select all the cells, data validation, then error alert. So I have my title as only numbers needed. Please make sure to enter numbers only. Now if I click in this cell and type a text, Now this is the output, only numbers needed. Please make sure to enter numbers only. So I'll cancel. So you can see that as I am entering these numbers, they are working perfectly. So this is perfectly done. We have used data validation to fill up our status column, salary, hours worked, and also hourly wage. You can format this by clicking on this format printer. So this is the hourly wage, and we use the custom validation option by using a function which is called the is number. We can also apply this to this phone number that we have here. So we select these cells, then we move back to our data tab, data validation, then select settings, custom. Now we type the equal to. Then after typing the is number function, under this column we have C3 as the active cell, which is going to serve as our initial cell. So when you click on OK, in this case, when you type a text, this is not going to accept. But when you type this is going to accept, because this is a number. These are different kinds of numbers that are being put together. Therefore, this is accepted. When you try to input a text or any symbol, that is not going to be accepted. You can see that I've typed these symbols and that is not accepted. The only data that is accepted in these validated cells are numbers. So we are entering full numbers. So you can see that when I entered this, it says this is not accepted. So we can base on this and enter all our data in this particular cell. Now, if I want to have this as formatted full number, I'm going to select all these cells, right click. You can also use Ctrl+1 on the keyboard. Then you move to format cells. Then I'm going to move to custom. And in this area, or in this arena, I'm going to select this, type the plus symbol, and then so I'm going to have this in this particular field. That means we have a +233, and then we are going to have these numbers. If I click on OK, this is what I have, and I want to have +233 because in my own country, that is Ghana, our code for our contact is +233. So you go back, right click, format cells. Then this time around, I'm going to click here, and when I come back to my data, I have this well formatted as phone numbers or contact numbers, and still we have our data validation as is number. You should make sure that whatever data you type is going to be of number. So if I click here and type a text, that's not going to be accepted. So I'm going to cancel. I have to type the data that matches the data validation. I hope you are learning something in this particular video. We are getting the experience and also the techniques that we can use when we have access to data validation. Now, I have filled up all these column headers. I have only this particular column header, and this time around we are going to use a different function. Now, through all this practical illustration, if you have a question, you can drop that in the comment section. Please like, share, and also subscribe to be part of this great community so that we can learn together. So these cells, I'm going to select them, and as I said, we'll be applying the last error alert to this cell. So we go to data validation, custom. Now this particular employee ID, the data we are going to type is going to be a serial number, which is going to be number 1, number 2, and continuously. you can also base on that and apply your own way of entering the serial numbers. Now the function we are going to use here is the count if function. So I'm going to select this cell. You type the count if function and open the bracket, and I am going to base on the first active cell, which is A3. Then I'll bring my comma, and I'm going to enter a data that is supposed to be needed in that particular cell. So I'm going to open my quotation mark. So this is the formula I'm going to use for this selected range of cells, equal to count if, and our active cell is the A3 in the range of cells, and we want to type NO, and I've entered a space with the asterisk symbol. It means that after the space you can enter any value in that particular cell, but because we all know that we want to type number 1, number 2, that's going to be a continuous thing, and I've closed that with a quotation mark. So it's going to be number space, that is going to be NO space with any value that you type in this particular field. I can go for the next error alert, which is information. Now this particular error alert is a permission alert that only informs users about an invalid data entry. It just tells you that whatever you've entered is an invalid data entry. So if this particular error alert is being illustrated, then now you know the kind of error alert you should use at a specific time or a specific moment when it comes to dealing with your data using data validation. So I'm going to use this and then type invalid entry. And note, any of this error alert that you choose, you have the option to give a title and also a message. Then I'm going to click on OK. Now when we get back to this, because we are supposed to type, you can see that this is accepted, number 1, number 2. Now in this case I'm going to type this with no space, and when I hit enter key it says invalid entry. Please make sure to enter the valid data. You can even add additional information. So let's go back and add those information. Let's say I want to type this. Now it says invalid entry. Please make sure to enter the valid data. The data format should be number 1 onwards. So you should base on this format and enter the perfect data in this cells. So you go back. Now if you could remember, I said the information error alert just gives you a warning that whatever you've entered is a wrong data. Even when you click on OK, it's going to be accepted. This works similarly to the warning option, but when it comes to the stop error alert, that will not allow you to enter the data that you need. So this, you have to go back and retype the accurate or valid data. I've perfectly organized this well organized data, which is employee information, which has its individual column headers, and now we have each data located under each column header, and we base on data validation or data validation restrictions to have this perfect data working perfectly for us. Now when it comes to date, let's see how we can have a custom date for our data validation. In this case, I'm going to click in this cell, and then I'm going to have today's date. So I am using the today's function. Press the enter key, and this is today's date, and I'm going to add 6 days more to this date. So I'll select this, bring the plus symbol, add 6, and press the enter key. So this is the date I want us to enter. That is going to be between this and this. So when you select these cells, let's clear everything. Move back to our data tab, data validation, and I'm going to choose custom. I'm going to use a function here, which is the AND function. So you type the equal to sign, AND, and open the bracket. Now this is our active cells, which is J3. So we want J3 should be greater than or equal to this cell that we are selecting here. Then we bring our comma and type the J3 once again, which is the cell reference. Should be less than or equal to this. Now I'm going to click within this cell and press F4 to fix this particular cell reference. Click F4 so that we have an absolute cell reference for a perfect output. So now that we have this, we click and close the bracket. And I'm going to click on OK. So this is a custom date that we have for this. You can also have an error alert. Then we click on OK. Now when we get back to this and type, so you can see that all the dates that I'm entering is between this specified range of data. So these are some of the custom data validation you can apply to your data in Microsoft Excel. Now another thing you can do in your worksheet when you have data validation applied to your cells is to find cells with data validation. And to do this, you can move to the home tab. Then we have the editing group. We have find and select. And when you click on find and select, we have data validation. This is going to select all your cells that consist of data validation. So you can see that all these cells are selected. If you have access to a colleague worksheet or any other person worksheet, and you want to note that if there is a data validation applied to the individual cells that we have in that spreadsheet, you can use this option by going to the home tab, find and choose data validation. Now if you want to remove data validation, and that is what I've already taught you, is to select the cells, move to the home tab, choose clear and choose clear all. Another way is to go to the data tab, choose data validation and choose clear all. This also clears your data validation. And the last option is you can select an empty cell that do not have any data validation. Right click, you choose copy, select the cells, right click, go to paste special, or you can hold Ctrl Alt V, and that's going to provide you with this particular window. Then you choose validation and click on OK. This is going to apply the cell that has no data validation to the cell that you've selected that consists of data validation. I would say a very big thank you for having such good time to spend with me throughout this data validation tutorial, which I believe that we have had a lot understanding and also learn so many technicalities that is going to help us to control our data entry using data validation.